And feel free to go to Replit with me here, and experiment or try it locally as well, doesn't matter. I'm going to go to Replit, click on create REPL and select HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I'm going to copy some code over here of a static HTML file. Copied it here, clicked on create REPL. And if it does succeed, which it does, paste the code over here. Fairly simple code, nothing too out of the ordinary. The body has an H1 tag that says to-do list. Two to-dos that I have to do, let's say. This is a to-do list application, right? Where you go and you add a new to-do, let's say eat food, click on add to-do, it should add the to-do over here. That is what this application should do. But as I said, this is a static website. If you click on add to-do, nothing happens. Why have we made this a static website? Kirat, why is this not a real to-do application? Because that is hard. That is not very easy to do. That is exactly what we'll be learning today. But it's slightly hard to dynamically change the contents of a web page. It's slightly hard to create a dynamic website. It is easy to create a static website, what you see over here, where I have a bunch of hard coded H4 tags, H1 tags, div tag, inside which I have an input tag, which is, this thing right here, a button, which is this button right here, and ignore the script.js. We don't need it. This much creates this website. This is a much simpler website compared to the VS Code website we had created, but this isn't dynamic. Most websites that you see today are dynamic websites. Good example of that is LinkedIn. If I open LinkedIn, you see some static content here. But as I scroll, do you see more contents getting added? If I scroll, do you see more contents getting added? Clubhouse is still a thing, surprising. As I scroll, you see more and more content dynamically get added. If I hover over this guy, I was hoping I see a card, I don't. But if I keep going, can you see more and more content is being added? So what is this page? This is a dynamic page. If the add to do button worked as expected, then what is this to do application? It is a dynamic website. As the name suggests, static HTML represents HTML that does not change. And similarly, can you guess what a dynamic HTML or dynamic websites are? Basically, websites who change dynamically, by which I mean the initial HTML that you get, the initial HTML that you see rendered over here changes. Somehow, as I'm scrolling, more HTML is getting appended to the end. That is what we want in the to-do application as well, right? If I click on add to-do over here, what do I want? I want here something gets added over here. Number 3. And what was the to-do that the user added? The user added EEE over here. I want as the user clicks, the page gets more and more content and the website becomes dynamic. Do we understand the difference between static and dynamic? Let's quickly do a poll. I would assume it's straightforward. And we can actually start to do some assignments and complete our to-do application. We understand the difference between static and dynamic. 96% is great. Let's try to make this website slightly dynamic. This is a fairly simple website. Last week we created a VS Code website, if you remember, but our VS Code website did nothing when you searched, and did nothing when you clicked on the download button, did nothing when you clicked on this cross button. All of this is dynamic nature, right? When I clicked on the cross button on this banner, when I click on this cross button, the banner goes away. So that is what makes this website dynamic. The content of HTML is changing as I click on various buttons. The same thing we want here. Let's see how we can do that one by one. There are 4 things you do, when you want to update content. I either want to add more things, add more to-dos over here. I might want to add functionality that lets the user delete these to-dos. So I might want to remove some elements from here. I might want to add the functionality to let the user edit their to-dos. So I want to allow them to modify it. And what is the 4th thing? Create, delete, edit, update. Which one did I forget? You get the idea. There are 4 things: create, delete, update, and read. Yeah, the 4th one is reading, which basically will happen here. when I type hi there and click on, or whatever, go to gym and click on add to do, I need to read the contents of this guy and put them over here. H4, go to gym. So what are the four things I need? Read the contents. If I click on add to do, add the contents. I will add a delete button here. If the user clicks on that, then delete the content. Maybe I will add a edit button here as well. When the user clicks on the edit button, we let them edit their content as well. Okay, these are the four things we need to support. Slowly and incrementally, let's try to build on top of it. Okay. The first thing and the easiest thing, the foundation for document object model are these five, call them functions on the document object. I repeat, these are five functions on the document object that you need to learn about if you want to read data, if you want to fetch elements. Again, what is the use case of reading data? The use case is okay, when the user types something here and clicks on this button, we need to read this data, okay, what exactly is written over here, and put that data over here. How can you read that? How can you get access to this data in some JavaScript? Maybe even before that, I should share. I suddenly remembered I haven't shared this. In an HTML page, you can write HTML. You can write CSS if you remember. A style tag where I can type H1 is, whatever font size, 100 pixels. I can write CSS. I can also write JavaScript. This is one thing that most of you might already know, but for the people who don't know, browsers understand what three languages? They understand HTML, CSS, and JS. Until now, we've only discussed these two, how to run HTML and CSS in a browser. Today's class, we'll understand how to run JavaScript inside the browser. Just how you can add a style tag inside which you can add, all your styles. You can add a script tag inside which you can add all your JavaScript. The only caveat, at least for this class, is going to be okay, put this script tag at the end of your file, basically after all your HTML. Okay, just for this class. Why, Harkirat? We'll get to, or maybe we won't get to, but the point is, if you keep it here, you will face some issues. For now, have your script tag at the end of the file, and here you can write whatever JavaScript you want, where name equal to Harkirat, console.log Harkirat. Let me write this code. Oh, sorry, console.log name. And let me try to run it. The web page looks exactly the same. And these two lines of code also run. How can I confirm that these two lines of code have run? I can right click over here. I can click on inspect. I repeat, right click, click on inspect, and you should be able to open the console inside which you should see whatever JavaScript code that you have written. So if you write any JavaScript code in your HTML file, you can confirm it is running by opening this console. How did I open the console? Right clicked on the website, clicked on inspect, clicked on the console tab, and I saw a bunch of logs over here. Ignore what these logs are, but I was able to see the Harkirat log, which means these two lines of code are running for me. Do we understand this? Let's do a quick poll. I don't know. This I suddenly realized, okay, I haven't introduced this. I would assume most people knew this already. But if you did not, you understand this. Great. 96% understand this. Great. So now let's make this JavaScript do something functional, right? JavaScript on the browser is not for logging variables like these. It is for adding some real functionality to your code base. It is for adding functionality like this. If I type something and click on add to do, this content should reach over here. How can we add that functionality? Step one is just reading whatever is written over here. Step one is just accessing elements on the DOM. What was DOM? Document Object Model. What was the goal of DOM? If you remember, the goal of DOM was abstracts the structure of a document into a tree of objects, allowing scripts, allowing this JavaScript that you write over here to manipulate the contents and structure dynamically. That is what we want, right? We want this script over here to manipulate the content of this page dynamically. What does dynamically mean? As I click buttons, the contents of the page should change. How can you do that? Step one is reading these elements. Now comes this, 5 things that I wrote at the top of this file. These 5 functions that we need to understand. With me, try one small thing. Do a console.log document. Console.log document and try to run the code again. Right click, inspect, console. You should see this very big document object get logged. This document object, if you hover over, you will see the whole thing turns blue. If you hover over this document object, do you see the whole page over here becomes blue colored? What does that sort of tell you? Here, this document object is a reference to this whole page. It is a reference to this top level root node over here. This is the document object. And from here, you can access anything you want. If you want to access this guy or this guy, or in our case, what do we want to access? We want to access the contents of this input box. You can do that using this document object, which is globally available to you. Is this document object available to you in Node.js? No, it isn't. This is only inside the browser that this is available to you. What do I mean? Okay, it isn't available in Node.js. We'll get to when we reach Node.js and running JavaScript on the backend. Right now, we're running JavaScript on the front end. We are running JavaScript on a website. We are running JavaScript inside a browser. Over there, you get access to document. If I type document dot query selector, that's the first function we're introducing for today. What is the first function we're introducing today? Document dot query selector, which lets you query based on a selector. Okay, I want the very first input tag, const input element equal to document dot query selector input. What would this line of code do? This line of code would get the input element node in this variable. I repeat, it would get a reference to this node in this variable. And if I log input L dot value, that will print whatever is written inside this. Let's see if that works or not. Inspect console and run. Let me type something here. Sorry. What's the easier way to do this? This will always be empty, so this will not work. Okay, let's do it this way. Just copy this specific line of code. What will happen right now is when I run this code, this is completely empty, right? And immediately these 3 lines of code would run. I repeat, immediately these 3 lines of code would run. And this is completely empty. So, input element dot value is also empty. I want to log this when I type something inside, right? I want to see the value when I type something inside. So for that, what you can do is remove everything over here. Maybe just log input element just to see what this input element is. Let's try that. What am I saying? Log this input element and see it in the console. Just how you logged document a while back. You logged this document variable. Now log this input element variable, which is document.query selector input. It is saying here the document dot query selector input. Please find me the first input tag that you have. This HTML did not have any input tag. This HTML, if you look at it, does not have any input tag, but our HTML does. In the body, there is a input tag right here. So if I run const input element equal to document.query selector input, it will give me a reference to this. If I right click inspect console, I see this input element. If I hover over it, notice how this thing becomes blue in color. It basically tells me you now have a reference to that node of the tree. You have reference to that node of the tree. And if I ever write something here, now let me show you another sort of a magical thing. Okay, you can run JavaScript here. that will run on the website. You can also run JavaScript over here in this console. Whatever JavaScript you run over here will start to run on this website. Arkirat, you are saying if I go to google.com and if I right click and click on inspect and click on console and start to type something, const name equal to Harkirat, then this code is running on this website. Yes, this code is running on this website on your local machine. It is not running on some Google server. But yes, you can start to, run JavaScript on this Google website. That is your own. You can also change HTML of Google website. If I want, I can, remove this whole section right here. I deleted the whole section. The buttons went away. So you can manipulate someone else's website locally as well. You can run JavaScript on someone else's website locally as well. That is totally possible. And that is exactly what we're doing here. Okay, given this website, let me run some code. Let me run this line of code. Const input L equal to document dot query selector input. It says identifier has already been declared. I had already declared input element, so I cannot redeclare it. Or if I want to redeclare it, I will have to choose a different name. So let me do const input element 2 equal to document dot query selector input and input L2 dot value prints what is present over here. So do we understand how can you fetch elements? What happens when I do const h1 element equal to document dot query selector h1? It will find the first h1 element for me. How many h1 elements do we have? We just have one h1 element. If I type h1 element dot inner HTML, I repeat, I have typed h1 element dot inner HTML. I have not typed h1 element dot value. I have typed h1 element dot inner HTML. Whenever you want to find the contents inside an h1 tag, you can't do dot value. You do dot value for an input box, but for an h1 tag, a div, you do dot inner HTML. It will give you all the HTML inside, which in our case right now is just some text. That is exactly what you see over here, to-do list. So do we understand how we can fetch contents for every guy? Not just this tag, even the button you can do. I can do document dot, no, we don't understand this. Document dot 84% understand this. That is fine. We'll take a small break here. But let me, for the other people, show. Okay, you can also do this. Document dot query selector button dot inner HTML. And that would give me the contents inside this button. Now let me look at Q&A for 2 minutes before I proceed. I'm assuming there are some standard questions that I can help answer. What if there are multiple input tags in the page? That is exactly where the next tag comes, which is the query selector all tags, but we'll get to that very soon. Would it be better if you can continue Web3 code after reaching React here? I feel like we are slowing you down there. Sorry, I don't understand this statement. I can't stop the code in the middle. Please explain how to solve this assignment. We should do eventually, not right now. Also, we have a video that covers it. Would you please repeat, explain again? How did JavaScript in the console recap Notion link? All right. Recap is what most people want. Let me quickly recap the very first thing that we are trying to do here. And let me also paste the slides link in the chat. What we're trying to do here is create a dynamic website. Until now, you guys have not written any JavaScript on a web page. We have only written HTML, which is great. It lets you create pretty websites like these. I wouldn't call this one pretty, but assume this is a nice looking website. You can create this. What can you not do? You cannot dynamically change the contents. The add to do button is doing nothing right now. That is the problem with creating a static website. Most websites that you see today are dynamic. If I click on this button, something happens, right? The DOM changed over here. If I click on this button, I'm not able to do it, but this button, it makes it full screen. This button, it makes it small screen. This is a dynamic website. As I click around, the HTML of this page is changing. Today's goal is to create a to-do list application like this. So we want to make sure today we, are able to, whenever the user clicks on the add to do button, add this content over here. Take this to do, put it over here as the third to do. How can we do that? For that, number one, I need access to this in JavaScript. So what do? I write this code. Here I'm going to run some JavaScript. I'm going to run const input L or input element equal to document.query selector, but input, which means give me the first input tag on this page. Where is the first input tag on this page? It is this guy right here. And then I say input element dot inner dot value is what has, this specific value. If I want to get access to whatever the user has written over here, go to gym, I can get it by doing this const value equal to input element dot value. And then, we will eventually write some code that actually puts this value over here as the next element. H4, go to gym. That we will come to eventually. But for now, the goal of this slide is fetching elements. How can you fetch various DOM elements? The very first way is using query selector. I wrote this code here, and then I showed you, this code you can actually run here as well. I repeat, the same code you can run by right clicking on the website, clicking on inspect, and then clicking on console. This is a slightly complicated thing. It's called Chrome Developer Tools. This is meant for developers, which is why it's called Chrome Developer Tools. So if you don't understand some parts of what is this console, it is fine. I will take a dedicated video where I share what are elements, what is console, what are sources, what is network, and what are these tabs used for. Chrome Developer Tools is, a whole topic in itself. But for now, I want you to focus on right click, inspect, console. Here, if I clear this CLEAR, if I type clear and call this, it clears the whole console for me. And now I can write some code. The code that I wrote was this. Const input element 2 is document.query selector input. And then const value is this, and then console.log value. If I run this, it prints go to gym, which is exactly what is written over here. If I change this and then do input element 2 dot value, it prints the new contents here. Of course, there is no point of using this here. Eventually, we will use this when I click on the button, right? We will write some JavaScript. Okay, whenever this button is clicked, let me quickly write that to, speed you up a bit. If I write this button on click equal to add to do, let's say I write some extra logic. Button on click equal to call the add to do function. And I define a function called add to do, then this is what we want, right? Okay, whenever the button is clicked, whenever this button is clicked, I want to fetch the value of the input box. Eventually, of course, I want to push this value here as well, which we'll come to how to do that. But at least I can log the value. Step one is done. Step one of creating my to-do application is done. What have I done? Button pay, I've added an attribute called on click. Just how input pay, I have added an attribute called type equal to text. And I can add more attributes here. Okay, placeholder equal to add your to do here. What is this placeholder? It is whatever appears over here when nothing is written. If I rerun this, you will see add your to do here comes over here. A placeholder I put. Just how I can add these attributes. On button, I can add a on click attribute. Okay, whenever this button is clicked, call this function. And what is this function doing? It is logging the current value right now. Eventually, we will see how this value is put over here. Let's see it in action. If I write some code and click on add to do, let's see if something gets printed in the console. Indeed, it does. Let me change this, add some more. Click on add to do. The thing gets logged over here. We are one step closer to completing our to do application is fetching the elements from the DOM. Now comes the question of what are the other ways of fetching elements? This is one way, but someone just asked in chat, how can you get the second input element? What if I want to get the second to do, the third to do, all of these to dos? If I do document.query selector of h4, it gives me the first h4 tag, this one right here. It doesn't give me the second h4 tag, doesn't give me the third h4 tag. How can I get the second and the third h4 tag? Query selector all. What does query selector all do? It says give me all the elements which have this h4 tag, not just the first one. It returns you an array. And here you can do, query selector all of h4 of 0, that will give you the first one. Query selector all h4 of 1, that will give you the second one. So on and so forth. If I do 2, it will give you the third one. What if I do 3, Harkirat? There is no third element, right? There are only 3 h3 elements. So you see undefined here. So what are the two things we learned? We learned about query selector. We learned about query selector all. If you want just the first element, you use query selector. If you want all the elements of that tag or of that selector, then you use query selector all. Cool. That's the purpose of this guy and this guy. Then there are 3 more that are not really needed. Query selector and query selector all are actually good enough to cover all use cases. For example, let's say to this button, I give an ID. I say button ID equal to BTN. Harkirat, what is an ID? Go to week 0 warm-up videos. We've covered it over there. Let me give a brief. Okay, ID, as the name suggests, it's a identification, right? Just like I have my Aadhaar ID. This BTN is a identifier for this button tag. Okay, on this whole page, this is the button tag which has this ID. Ideally, whenever you're assigning an ID to an HTML element, I can do it here. I can do it, here. I can do it here. But ideally, whenever you are doing this, you should make sure you don't repeat it. अगर इसकी ID is BTN, इसकी ID should not be BTN. It should be, to do 2, let's say, or to do 3. For this guy, it should be to do 2. For this guy, it should be to do 1. IDs shouldn't be repeated ideally. You can still do it if you want. But as the name suggests, you shouldn't repeat the ID in various elements. If you do feel like you want to repeat, then you use classes. We'll get to what classes are. But do we understand IDs? I mean, let's not do a poll, but hopefully we understand IDs. Okay, every element over here, I have a unique identifier for. If I save and run this, now if I want to, query this second h tag or the second to do, rather than doing, document dot query selector h4, I can do document dot query selector dot to do. Sorry, hash to do. I cannot do that. ID equal, dot to do 1 or hash to do 1. I thought you could do that. Let's see. Query selector on ID. Hashtag. Document. Okay. You can do that, right? Let's see. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. I'm on the whole page. Let me reopen the console. When you're opening the console, make sure you're right clicking here on this website and clicking on inspect. I was on the whole website. I was on the Replit website. Again, what did I explain? Okay, you can do a document.query selector dot to do 1 or maybe hashtag. There you go. Hashtag to do 1. What is hashtag to do 1? Go back to the CSS class. In CSS, we did something like this, right? Okay, we actually might not have done this in the official class. We have definitely done this in the warm-up videos in week 0. Here, if I want to attach style to this h4 tag, I used to write something like this, a style tag, where I can say hashtag to do 1, background color red. If I write this code, the background color of this guy becomes red. IDs are a way to identify a specific element. कि यार जो to do 1 element है ना, the element which has ID to do 1. What does hashtag mean? Hashtag means ID. Whatever has ID to do 1 should have this background color. This is how you use an ID in CSS. And if you want to use the same ID in JavaScript, what can you do? Document.querySelector, hashtag to do one, which will give you, again, I think I'm in the wrong website, right click, which will give you the specific tag right here. So this is just another way to grab an element. And if you don't like this, then you can also do this document dot get element by ID to do one. This also does the same thing. That is why I said okay, query selector is actually good enough. I said, right, okay, these two are good enough. You don't really need these three, but these three are slightly more readable. Okay, I want to get element by ID, which has to do one. I want to get element by ID, which has ID to do two, which is this element right here. If I hover over it, I see the second element here. So you can use dot get element by ID. You can use dot query selector, hashtag, and then the ID of that thing. Hopefully this is clear. I will do a poll at the end of the slide, but let me introduce one last thing, which is classes. Okay, a lot of times you want multiple elements to have similar styles. I repeat, I might want all three of these to have the same style. So what you can do is assign a class to them. Yeah, this is going to belong to the class to do. This is going to belong to the class to do. And I'm going to say, yeah, the to do class is going to have a background color of yellow, let's say. What have I done? I've given a class to some of these elements. I can give it to more of these elements. I can give it to, let's say this guy as well. Then all four of these will have these styles attached to them. All four of these elements will have a background color of yellow. If I run this, I see yellow color here, 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 and here. That is what classes are used for. What are classes used for? Attaching the same style to four different elements. You might ask her, Kirat, can I not do this? ID equal to do one, and then hashtag to do one. ID equal to do two, and then hashtag to do two. And this and this. What is wrong in this? It is a lot of repeated code, right? It does the same thing, but you are repeating yourself again and again. So why are classes better than IDs? Because you don't have to write repeated code. This will also work. If I run this, I still see yellow on all four of these. If I have ID here, and ID here, I will still see yellow on all four of these, but I'm writing a lot of repeated code. If I have to replace the background color with green, I have to make that change in four different places. I have to make this green, and then, here and here and here. The common rule is you shouldn't repeat yourself, which is why classes are useful. They let you attach the same style to, multiple elements. And this is how you use a class in case of CSS. Attach style to the specific class. As you can see, that style is attached to all three of these elements. How do you get it in JavaScript? Can you guess? Document.querySelector dot, what was the name of the class? To do. And as you can see, it returns you the first element which has this class. If I want all three of these elements, I can do a query selector all. It gives me all three of these elements. Can you guess what get element by class name does? Get elements by class name does. I think only one of these is valid. I don't know why I wrote two of them, but that get elements by class name would do what? It will give you all the elements that have that class. So you can either use this or you can use this. This is why I said a query selector all is good enough. You can query anything you want from this. You don't need to use get elements by class name or get element by ID. Now let's do a quick poll and start to inch towards the next slide of our class. Uh, Feel free to read through, all these mini assignments that I have, but I'm just, okay, great. 96% is great. 95%, 6%. Cool. For the 5%, I'm happy to stick around towards the end, but let's proceed. Do you understand fetching elements? Can you now update elements? Can you guess how would you update an element? Harkirat, why would I want to update an element? We don't need to update elements yet. Our to-do application is simple. It does not have an edit button over here. But if it did, then, updating would make sense. Whenever the user wants to edit one of these elements, edit one of their to-dos, then updating would make sense. Right now, we have a simple to-do application, so we don't really need it. Let me also copy some boilerplate code so you guys also have the same, and you can also do the same thing like I have. Go to the fourth slide, fetching elements. Nah. Go to the third slide. Not even this second. Sorry, the second slide, and copy this basic boilerplate code if you want to follow along. If not, that's fine. Um, but here on this boilerplate code, what if I ask you, okay, every 1 second, I repeat, every 1 second, increase this counter by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say I give you this assignment. Okay, every 1 second, you should increase this number. This element should update. What are we discussing? We are discussing updating elements. The assignment is every 1 second, this should update. How will you write this code? Take a minute and think about it. I already have some hints. We understand set timeout. If you have done the assignments, then you might understand set interval. If you don't, then it's fine. I'll be solving it. But let's say you understand these two. And I just shared, document dot query selector all of, h4 of 2 of 1 is how you can get this element. Given you have this, given okay, this dot inner HTML gives you this. And let me share one extra thing. Dot inner HTML equal to something can change the contents. I repeat, if I select an element and I say dot inner HTML equal to something new, whatever I type over here gets updated on that element. Can you try to write the code such that this element should just change to 1, 2, 3, 4? Simple, create a stopwatch. Don't even worry about any contents after. Try to create a simple stopwatch that goes up by 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like that. Take a minute and then we'll restart. Until then, let me look at Q&A. But if you understand this, quickly try to code this, then I'll be coding this later. Alrighty, Q&A. When to use, can't we do dot, you can do dot value. In fact, in case of an input, you can only do value, I think. Let's see. Document dot query selector or input dot value dot inner HTML. In case of an input, you can only do value. In case of other elements, you might be able to do value. You might not also. You can't do value in case of other elements. You have to do inner HTML. Stopwatch as in each second. Yeah, like a clock that goes, not a clock, like a stopwatch. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Akiyat, I have a problem. Whenever I see tutorial, I'm able to understand, but I try to code myself, I face major issues. Practice is what you need. That's the only thing. I mean, it's true for everyone. You're not sitting enough and, coding enough projects. Is there a project that interests you? Build it. And, that's the only way you learn coding, if I'm being honest. Tutorials are good, but only once. Second time you should code yourself. Just click DevTools on Replit. So Replit also lets you see the console like this. So if you want to look at a cleaner console, you can click on DevTools suggested by anonymous attendee here. Wrap a function. Okay, that's right. Still can't DM you on Twitter, you mean? Yeah, I thought that's a bad idea, so I dropped it. Because I just then will stop messaging anyone on Twitter. Discord, but that only happens, right? My Discord is open. I have so many messages, I don't open them. The exclusivity is why I reply on Twitter, I realized. So that's why I'm not opening my DMs. If I open them, and everyone will spam me. Why are we going so fast? That is interesting. I don't think if 95% of the class understand, I don't think we're going fast. I think this is as slow as it gets. Alrighty. Let's try to code this. What do we want? Let me share something extra over here. You can also do this. Script src equal to script.js. If you don't want to write all your JavaScript over here, you can point it to a file like script.js. And if I open the sidebar, in my files, I have script.js. Here I can write some JavaScript code. That way, it's just cleaner to look at versus writing it over here. Just like the CSS files, right? You can link to external CSS files. You can link to external JavaScript files as well. That is exactly what is done over here. If I look at the script file over here, this assignment is also part of week 1 assignment. So if you've done week 1 assignments, this should be straightforward. The way to do this is create a what's called set interval. Now, if you don't know what set interval is, again, as I said, assignments mein hai, I will share an alternate approach also that uses set timeout. Both of you have discussed many times, so hopefully you understand that. Set interval basically calls a function. Let me define a function pehle. Function called callback, which is going to log a counter variable. I repeat, I am defining a counter variable equal to 0. Inside my callback function, what am I doing? I am logging the counter variable and I'm calling counter equal to counter plus 1. Simple function I've written right now, nothing else. Let me not worry about anything else. Let me not worry about set interval. Let me just call this function. What do you think happens when I do that? Let me call this 5 times. If I call this function 5 times, what will happen? Pehle control will reach here. 0 will get logged. Then control CTR will become 1. Then I called it again. 1 will get logged. Then CTR will become 2. 3 will get logged. 4 will get logged. 5 will get logged. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will get logged on this in the console. Not over here yet in the console. If I run this, as someone mentioned, I can just click on DevTools over here to let me do that. I can still inspect element also, but this is just a easier way to access the console. This settings icon right here. I see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 printed on the screen. Now let me do something extra. Rather than calling it directly, let me write this code. Set interval callback 1000. What am I saying? Okay, I want to call the callback function every 1 second. Set interval will call this function every 1 second. What did set timeout do? Set timeout calls this after 1 second only once. Set interval will call this every 1 second infinitely. It will keep calling this function again and again. So if I now run this, what do you think gets printed in the console? After 1 second, 0 gets printed, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Every second inside the console, this counter variable gets printed. Let's do a quick poll and see how many of us understand set interval and how I have called it over here. Again, this file runs because I have linked it in index.html. In index.html, I have linked this file, which is why I see it in script.js over here. 90% understand, 10% don't. Let me do a, let me just look at Q&A. Anything specific you don't understand? I've completed all the slides for today. Is there anything else to do? Feel free to leave if you've completed all the slides for today. Yeah, don't worry about it. Easy stuff, right? I'm not able to execute the script in my local versus code. If you are not able to execute the script locally in your VS Code, let me quickly show you. You are probably missing something obvious. How will I run this locally in my VS Code? I will first create an empty folder, CD projects. I'm going to call it to do app week 3. Let me open this in Visual Studio Code. I have opened it in Visual Studio Code. Let me create an index.html file. Let me create a script.js file. That is what you might have done as well. Inside the index.html file, let me add a HTML tag. Let me add a body tag to do 1 inside an h2, to do 2 inside an h2, to do 3. And here let me add script src equal to script.js. That is what you have written locally, hopefully. Script.js does what? Defines a function called callback, which will log a CTR variable. Let CTR equal to 0. Log the CTR variable and do a set interval. Okay, every 1 second, what is the second argument? 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. Call the callback function. Let's see if it runs locally or not. Let me open this in my browser. Let me open the console. Zero gets logged, zero gets logged, zero gets logged. Zero keeps on getting logged again and again for me. Why? Because I forgot to do a CTR equal to CTR plus one. So that is what how I'm able to run it locally. If you're not able to run it locally, you probably have some, error in the console. Try to debug that error. All right. Cool. Now though I have it locally, let me continue running it locally. If you want to run it on, Replit, that's fine as well. What is the thing we had to do? We had to document dot query selector all h2, get me all the h2s, and for the second h2, for this guy right here, I want to change its value from 1 to 3 like that. So what can I do? This thing dot inner HTML equal to counter. What have I done? Okay, get me the second h2 element and change its inner HTML to this. If this seems complicated, you can do something like this. Const element equal to this, L dot inner HTML equal to CTR. Either is fine. This is probably slightly easier to, read. So again, if you read through the code, what does it do? Every 1 second callback gets the second h2 element. This is zero based indexing. So zero points to the first element. One will point to the second element. Change the inner HTML there, increase the value of counter. If I open this and refresh, after 1 second, this becomes 0, 1, 2, 3. Do we understand updating? Hopefully that's straightforward. I don't think we need a poll. Feel free to do a poll, Akash. But I would assume this is straightforward. And you're able to update elements every 1 second. Now we understand the second thing over here, updating elements. 93%. Decent, I guess. Again, at the end, available for doubts. Let me finish this up for everyone because, it's fairly simple stuff. Deleting elements. This might be slightly complicated for, some people. Deleting and adding are actually, slightly harder. So let's start with deleting. That's easier. Deleting happens via the remove child function. But as the name suggests, this is for removing a child. If I ever want to delete, let's say, this element right here, this to do one element, I will have to select the parent and on the parent call this remove child function. I repeat, the only complicated thing about deleting elements is okay, you don't destroy yourself. I cannot do document.query selector dot to do one or document dot get element by id to do one and destroy it. I have to get its parent and then call remove child on the parent. Let's see this in action. Let me copy this code over here. Let me paste this in Replit only, easier to understand or easier to look at. And something is wrong in this code right here. Oh, I've pasted this in the wrong file. Let me delete script.js. Let me go back to index.html. Paste the code here. Run it. What does the code look like? Let's go from top to bottom. Let me remove everything from the head tag. So it's just easier to look at. In the body tag, I have a heading called to-do list. I have a div inside which I have the very first div with ID equal to to-do-1, which has a title. And below it, I have added a delete button. I repeat, what have I done? I've added a top level div, which has, an element called this and a delete button. Not styled very well. Would have been nice if this was placed right next to it. How can you do that? Style equal to display colon flex. If you remember from the CSS class, this is how you can put these side by side. If I run this, the delete button comes right next to take class. It looks slightly ugly, but hopefully that is, cleaner to look at. Question is, when I click on this, how does it get removed? When I click on this second delete button for the second to do, how does it get removed? Let's look at it. What have I done? Button on click equal to delete to dos of 1. For this guy, button on click equal to delete to dos of 2. When you click on a button specifically for these two to dos, for this guy right here and this guy right here, when you click on this button, what do? We call the delete to do function with the index of the to do. Are you deleting the first to do or are you deleting the second to do? The control reaches here. What do I do here? Const element equal to document dot get element by id to do dash index. I get to do dash one. If I call it with delete to do one, I will get to do dash two, this div right here. If I call it with index equal to 2. So that is the significance of this argument. The reason I am passing in this argument is so that yahan pe I can do document.getElement by id to do dash that specific div. Once I get this element, what do I call? I call element dot parent node, which means if this is the element that I got, dot parent node would give me this element, dot remove child, that specific element. So this is the slightly, there's no easy way to do. There might actually be, I don't know, element dot destroy. Okay, I would just want to kill myself. There's no easy way to, I just want to remove myself from the DOM. This is a slightly, better way to do it, or maybe probably the only way to do it, I think, from what, if I remember correctly. You go to the parent node and the parent node calls remove child with that specific element. That is how the delete functionality here is working. Let me make this slightly, slightly prettier to look at as well. Now I have two to-dos, one below the other. I have a delete button right next to both the to-dos. When I click on the first button, what happens? Delete to-do gets called with 1. Over here, what do I get? I get this parent element right here. What do I get? Document.getElement by id to-do-1. This top level div I get here. And then I call element dot parent node, which is this dot remove child element. You can also do this div class or id equal to do parent. If I do this div id equal to do parent, so yahan pe rather than doing element dot parent node, I can do this document dot get element by id to do parent dot remove child, the first child or the second child. That will also do the same thing. Rather than calling element dot parent node, I'm just selecting the parent node like this. Look at the code, feel free to breathe it in, see it in action. It does work as expected. It is able to delete my to-dos. We are almost there, 75% done. We understand how to read elements. We understand how to update elements. We understand how to delete elements. The last thing that is left is adding elements to the DOM. That is the only thing that is left for you to create your first dynamic website, a to-do application. What does dynamic mean? It means as time goes by, you're changing the contents of this page. I'm able to delete elements from this page, and eventually we'll be able to add elements on this page as well. Can we do a quick poll, Akash? Do we understand deleting elements? Can we proceed to the last slide, which is adding elements? Okay, decent, 85%, not great. Let me spend 5 minutes here, maybe 8 minutes. We can also take a break of 8 minutes, after which I will proceed to these two slides. If you understand these two slides, drop off. No need to waste any time. I know I don't know, very debatable, but I think I'm going fairly slow. So don't waste time. If you think this is straightforward, complete these two. Feel free to drop off. Other than that, a small 7 minute break now. And I'm looking at Q&A. We will restart at 9:10. Let me look at Q&A. Recap, delete, repeat. Recap. So to delete an element, we have to wrap it inside a parent element. Every element is wrapped inside a parent element. Whatever you write, at the very top level, there will be a body, right? So doesn't matter what you write, there will always be a parent. Recap. Slides, all right, that's simple. Slides are here and a bunch of recaps. Delete element. All right, let's kick things off again. How can you delete something from a page? I have a very simple page here. Let's not complicate it at all. Very simple page. And I ask you, KR, create a button that randomly deletes a to do over here, or create a button that deletes the top level to do over here. Button delete to do. You wrote something like this, and you wrote, when the button gets clicked, call the delete random to do function. Okay. And in the same file, let's say I define this function called delete random to do. What is this function supposed to do? It is supposed to delete one of these three. Doesn't matter. After one is deleted, then it's supposed to delete the next one. Okay. How can it do that? It can do something like this, right? Const element equal to document dot query selector h2. What will this give? This will give the first h2 element, this guy right here. And then to delete this element, I repeat, you can do a bunch of things with this element, right? You can call element dot inner html equal to something new. If I do this, then I am updating the element. I repeat, if I do this, then what am I doing? When the button is clicked, I am updating the element. This should be called update element in this case. Let's see it in action. If I write this code, I am just updating the contents to something else. If I see this in action, if I click on this, this changes to something new. I haven't deleted it. What have I done? I have updated it. For this code, as I click on this, this changes to something new. What do we want to do? We want to delete it. The way to delete it is first you get the element. Let's say something like this that we already did. Get the element. Then you get the parent element. Const parent element equal to. There are two ways you can do this. You can either call element dot parent node, or you can write const parent element equal to, you know, body id equal to body, let's say. So I can do, document dot get element by id body. One of these two is fine. You can either get it normally like we have until now, or if you already have the element, you can call element dot parent node. That would give you access to this guy. Then all you have to do is call parent element dot remove child, the element that you want to remove. This is the element, this guy right here. This is the parent element, this guy right here. Parent element dot remove child. This element will remove the first child over here. If I see it in action now, if I click on this, the first to do went away. If I click on this again, what will happen? The control will again reach here. It will again get the top level to do, which is this guy right here. If I click on this, that gets removed. If I do it again, this also gets removed. So what is this guy doing over here? It is fetching an element, fetching its parent element, calling parent element dot remove child, the element that it fetched. That is how deletion works. In case of DOM, let me paste this code in the slides so you can try this code out locally. This is a slightly more digestible code compared to, you passing in an argument over here one and then using that argument over here. This is slightly more digestible to, understand hopefully. All right, let me paste this in the slides and then let's go on to the last bit for today. Deleting elements. Element we did in class. All right, you should see it in the slides now. Specifically, you should see it in the deleting elements section right here. This is the code that I just wrote locally. If this still feels confusing, I should be able to finish. I don't know this. We might not do the last slide. Might do it. We will see. But that's slightly hard to chew. We will do it, and then I'll happy to repeat it tomorrow. But I should be able to finish this by 9:30. Then I'm open to doubts. All right. There's 2 more minutes. So let me look at Q&A if there is any more questions. What if we do in an HTML method and put nothing inside? Then it will be empty. It will be an empty to do. Try it out. If I do a, whatever document dot element dot inner HTML equal to empty, what will happen? That specific div will become empty. That is it. Let's see. If I run this, if I Why is this so slow? If I click on this, that specific div became, what happened here? Oh, that is also deleting. Is that what you meant? That is not exactly deleting it. That's another way to almost delete it, but it doesn't get rid of this to do. It just, deletes the inner HTML. The div still remains. That is also, yeah, fair way to delete if, that's what you meant. Yeah. All right. Cool. When I code projects, I have to search ChatGPT or Google. Is that good? Google is totally fine. ChatGPT is also fine, as long as you're asking it the right questions. By which I mean, don't ask it to code the whole thing. But wherever you're stuck, ChatGPT is just finding the answer for you and giving it to you in plain English. So it's not the worst thing in the world, or like not bad at all. Everyone Googles, even including me. When you saw when I was stuck at some point, I Googled, right. So Googling totally fine as long as that subset is what you're Googling. All right. Adding elements. Last thing, fairly simple again. Two things we have to learn about: create element and append child. This gets a little confusing sometimes, so bear with me a little bit. There is this function called create element that will create an element outside the DOM. I repeat, the biggest thing to worry about here is, let me create a very simple code over here. Body, hi there. Very simple code, nothing complicated over here. Hi there is written here. You see hi there rendered over here. Now let me do something. I again open the console over here and I wrote document dot create element div. Okay. I created a fresh div element. That is what this statement does. Document dot create element div will create a fresh div element. Let me store it in a variable also. Const div element equal to document dot create element div. If I press enter and then I see what is held inside divl, you will see it has an empty div. But notice as I hover over this, I don't see any blue section over here. I repeat, if I hover over this, I don't see any blue lines over here. If I type document and hover over this, the whole document becomes blue, right? If I type document dot query selector body, whatever renders, if I hover over it, it tells me, yeah, ye rahi body. This is all the body right here. Let me put this hi there inside a div. And then let me run this again. Inspect this again. If I do document dot query selector div, if I hover over this div, uh, let me give this an ID. Top div. If I do document dot query selector dot top div, sorry, hashtag top div. Say, run it again, inspect it, console, this thing. It gives me the div. If I hover over this div, I see a blue thing over here. So up until now, whenever we were querying elements, whenever I run document.query selector hashtag top div, it gives me this div right here. How do I know? If I hover over this, I see blue over here. But when I did let div l equal to document dot create element div, if I log this div element and hover over this thing right here, I see no blue over here. What does that tell you? I see no blue over here in the DOM. That tells you I haven't yet inserted this in the DOM. I repeat, I haven't. This is a variable that exists in JavaScript. This doesn't yet exist inside the DOM. I have not yet put this over here. I still have to write another command to put this element over here. Can you guess what that command is? What were the two commands we were learning here? Create element and append child. Just like a parent can remove a child, this body can remove this child over here. It can also add a child. So can you guess how can I add this div inside the body? Let me give this div element some inner HTML. Hi there. Or maybe hi there too. Again, notice nothing appears here. I have a div element that I created I gave it some HTML. I did not put it here yet. The way to put it there is document.query selector body. I want to get the parent inside which I want to append child. What function am I calling? I'm not calling remove child. I'm calling append child. I'm telling it, hey, here is this div element that I have created in memory for now. I want you to append it to the body. So what will happen now? Body will get another div below it. If I press enter, you see hi there 222 over here. Do we understand how can we append elements to the DOM? To recap, what have I done? I had an empty div over here. Let me write the same code over here now. Let me create a script tag inside which I will first do const div element equal to document dot create element div. I will give it some body dot inner HTML equal to hi there. And then I will call document dot query selector body to get the parent element, this guy right here, as a variable. And then I will do a parent element dot uh, append child div element. This statement is what actually takes this div and puts it in the DOM. If I don't put the last statement over here, then notice only hi there is printed. But if I uncomment the last statement over here, notice hi there is printed, and then the next hi there is also printed, which is this div right here. So append child is necessary for you to append something to the DOM. Just calling this is not enough. If you just call this, that does not put something on the DOM. That just creates an in-memory variable that doesn't exist over here. If you want to put it over here, you have to call parent element dot append child. Do we understand this much? Let's do a poll. If you understand this, then to-do application should be, a piece of cake. 87% understands this. That's not too bad actually. Let me create the to-do application from scratch in front of you. I would urge you to code along as well. Let's finish off all of these slides before we reach this more complex elements section. Let's try to create a to-do application from scratch. Okay? From scratch, empty page I'm going to code. Try to code with me, understand a little bit. Okay? We want to create a to-do application. Right now, what do I have? An empty page over here. I would urge you to have an empty page on your side as well. Let me create a top level HTML tag. Then let's create a body tag. Harkirat, where is the head tag? We don't need the head tag. We don't need any metadata. So empty body tag is fine. I will have a input type equal to text over here. And a button that will say add to do. If I run this, I see a text box and a add to do button that does nothing. What do I want when the user clicks on the add to do function? I want the add to do function to get called. So this is the code that I write next. If you're following along, take 30 seconds, try to catch up, try to run it locally, try to see if it works for you or not. Okay, take a minute. Until then, I'm looking at Q&A. And if you can even go ahead and try to code the whole thing really quickly. And if you understand that also, then go to the next slide and try to do the more complicated things that are present in the next slide. I don't have access to this anonymous attendee, your Notion doc right here. Explain parent and child. Let's go to the DOM first slide. The code that I've written on the left, what are the two children that HTML has? It has this head child and it has this body child. The head child itself has two children. It has this title child. It has this meta child. So what is this parent child relationship? It is, just compare this to this if you are able to understand it. Okay. Inside the HTML tag, there are two top level tags, the head tag and the body tag, which is why head and body are the children and this is their parent. And similarly, inside the head tag, there are two children, title and meta, title and meta. And similarly, inside body, there is just one child called H1, which is this child right here. So that is how parents and childs are. And why do you need them? Because if you ever want to delete or add anything, you need a reference to the parent that calls add child or delete child. The functions that JavaScript gives you are add child and delete child or whatever, remove child. So, you need reference to the parent, which will call remove child on itself or, add child on it. All right. Let's look at a script tag inside which we will create a add to do function. And here I have to write the code to number one, extract all the value inside. So const value equal to document dot query selector input. I am trying to first get this input element in a variable. And then I'm saying the current value is input element dot value. This is how you extract the inner value inside an input element. You first get the input element, then you log input element dot value. Given you have this value, what do you want? You want to insert something in the DOM. You want to create a new div element, const new div element equal to document dot create element div. What should the body of this div be? New div element dot inner HTML should be what? Should be the value of the to do. Whatever is written inside this should be the value of the div. And then lastly, get the body child, get the parent, get the document dot query selector body and append to it this new div element that you have. I created a new div element. I appended it to this body so that the body has input, the body has add to do, and then it has all my to dos one after the other. If I run this and type hi there, I see hi there written here. If I type go to gym, that is my second to do over here. If I type take class, that is my third to do over here. One by one, I'm appending this div element that I'm creating every time this function is called. If you look at the final HTML over here, notice the body has the input tag, the button, this input tag, this button, the script tag it also has. Harkirat, how did this get moved here? Don't worry about. After these three, div1, div2, div3, these were added dynamically. If I click on it again, you see a fourth div is added over here. If I change this and click on add to do, a fifth div is added over here. I am dynamically updating the HTML of my page. What have I created? I have created a dynamic website. That is how you create a dynamic website where as people click on buttons, it starts to get pre-filled. Do we understand this? Now, can we create our own to-do application? Sort of. I mean, we haven't added delete functionality right now. That should be easy to add. Let's do a quick poll, Akash. Do we now understand how to create our own to-do application, a mild to-do application? Because if we do, then the next slide, we will actually do some, more complex things when we add the delete functionality. Okay? 92% is great. Let's add the delete functionality next. And then, I will take doubts, whatever you need. What is the problem right now? There is no delete button right next to it. So step one, let's try to just add a button. Let's not worry about functionality just yet. Let's try to just add a button because, this will get a little complex. What will happen in this slide? So bear with me for some time. What I'm saying now is, rather than adding just plain text inside the div, I repeat, rather than having just plain text inside the div, what if inside the div, I could have something like this. Pehle to add this, then add a button. Delete. What if I change the logic to not put just go to gym, but put this very long, HTML inside? Because if I press enter, abhi to it is messed up. You see something like this. But in my code, if rather than doing div element dot inner HTML equal to value, if I do this, okay, div element dot inner HTML equal to div tag, then let's say a hard coded value for now, go to gym slash div button tag delete slash button tag div element dot inner HTML. The text itself says inner HTML. मेरे अंदर का HTML क्या है? What is the HTML inside me? It is this. If I do this, then notice as I click on add to do, my to do gets added and a button gets added along with it. Why? Because what have I said? I've said my div elements inner HTML is not simply go to gym. It is not simply the value that is here. If the value here is go to gym, it is not simply this value. It is a div inside which I have this value slash div and then a button inside which I have delete and then slash button. So this is one weird way to create a more complex DOM element and put it on the DOM rather than having a simple DOM element that says that has some text. I have a slightly more complicated DOM element that I put. You might ask, Harkirat, this to doesn't have the value coming from here. So you can do some simple string concatenation, right? What can you do? Some simple string concatenation. Concatenating a string means adding multiple strings together. You can do something like this. Div plus the value plus slash div followed by this button tag. This might feel a little overwhelming to you, what I've done here. I have said, okay, the HTML inside this div, it is not going to be just the value. It is not going to be just the value. It will be a div which will have the dynamic value over here. If I have written ASD here, that will go over here. And then the slash div tag, and then button, and then delete, and then slash button. Do we understand what is happening here? Let me show you this in a console. If I open the console over here, and if I type let value equal to Harkirat Singh, then what does this do? If you look at this string concatenation, what does it print? Prints the same thing. Opening div element, Harkirat Singh inside, closing div element, button, delete, slash button. So it is just another way for me to join three strings together. And if you join these three strings, you get some basic HTML, which I am adding over here. Okay, bhai, the naya div ka inner HTML is going to be this complicated div. If I run it again, and put to do's here, go to gym. I see the go to gym to do, go to class. I see the go to class to do, so on and so forth. This is how you dynamically add complex elements to the DOM. Until now, I was adding a simple element to the DOM. When I did this simple string to the DOM, if I run this, it still looks like a to-do application, but it doesn't have delete functionality. To be able to add delete functionality, I need to not just add a string, but add proper HTML elements anytime the button is clicked. That is what I'm doing here. If I click on add to do, text gets added and a button gets added. Of course, the button is not doing anything right now. That is what we will do next. But hopefully this is clear. If not, let me finish the delete functionality. Then I'll, happily do a poll and everything. What is the last thing we want? Okay, when the user deletes it, when the user clicks on this button, the full element deletes from here as well. That is what we want, right? So what can we do? We can type button on click equal to. Notice I use single quotes over here. I don't use double quotes over here, because if I use double quotes, the whole string concatenation gets messed up. I repeat, I have double quote here already. If I use on click equal to another double quote, then it will feel like this string concatenation has ended, which is why I just used single quotes over here, so that the end of this starting, double quote is over here. अगर मैंने यहाँ पे डबल कोट डाल दिया, बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी. इफ आई पुट अ डबल कोट ओवर हियर, जावास्क्रिप्ट विल थिंक दिस थिंग एंड्स ओवर हियर, बट आई डोंट वांट दैट. आई वांट यार ऑन क्लिक पे ये फंक्शन कॉल करना है. तो दैट इज व्हाई I've used single quotes over here. Hopefully that is straightforward. I can also use single quotes over here. And in that case, I will use double quotes over here. Just use the different one. You can also do a third thing, which is escaping characters, but don't worry about that just yet. यहाँ पे single quote use हुआ है, तो यहाँ double कर लो. If you use double quote over here, then use single quote over here so they don't conflict with each other. Given we have this, let me define the function called to do delete as well. Function delete. Right now does nothing. Okay. Delete is a reserved word, so you cannot use it. Let me call it delete to do. And let me replace this with delete to do over here. This should work almost. Let me put a console.log here. Delete called. This is very close to what we want. We've added some functionality to the delete button. If I type hi over here, or whatever, button on click equal to this single slash button. क्या हो गया इसको? Slash div button on click this thing slash div. On click equal to delete to do. What is wrong here? Let's see. Let's do some debugging. This doesn't look like a button anymore. If I type this, as you can see, delete looks like text. We don't know why. That is what we'll try to debug now. Inspect button on click equal to delete to do delete slash button on click equal to delete to do. What have I done here? Div value slash div button on click equal to div has the button. Why is this HTML so complicated? I'm sure someone already knows in chat. Let's see. Who has seen this before me? Or like who was able to figure this out before me? Let's open chat here. Anyone see it? C is capital, quotation, C is capital, huh? No, it's not that. Undouble quote. I also think it's the quote somewhere. You've used inner HTML. That is fine. That's a problem. Double quote. I don't think that's a problem either. Huh. I mean, notice what's happening. What's getting added here is not a button, but something else. Button, which has a delete function, slash button, and then some extra on click at the end. Why is there some extra on click at the end? On click. Can you not do this when you're adding? I mean, this is like now we're just spitballing and trying to figure this out. Okay, why I cannot add on click over here? I will try a few hit and trials, and then if not, it doesn't work, then we'll figure something else out. Let's see. If I remove the on click, everything is fine. I see a very nice delete button. If I add ID equal to 1 over here, let's not worry about anything else. Let's just add an ID. That doesn't break it. If I add a on click equal to 1 over here, let's say, that also doesn't break it. Then if I add a on click equal to delete to do over here, that also doesn't break it. What were we doing differently? We'll come back to and figure out what that was. Now I'm really interested to see what we were doing wrong, but okay, let me hold my horses here and let's finish the whole thing first. Okay, we have created a button, and when you click on the button, this function gets called. Let me add a to do. Hi there, add to do. Hello, add to do. When I click on the delete button, delete called gets logged. What do we want when the delete button is called? We want this div to get deleted. How can we do that? There are various ways. One way that I can think of is that whenever you are creating a div element, give it an ID. I repeat, give it an ID. And whenever you are deleting it, just delete the div with that ID. So what is the approach that I'm taking? Okay, whenever you create a new div, let's create a global variable called counter. Let counter equal to 1, let's say. And whenever we create this div element, I do a div element dot set attribute. Now I'm introducing a new thing here called set attribute id comma counter, and then counter equal to counter plus 1. What I'm saying is कि जो नया div element बन रहा है ना, the new div element, set the id attribute over there to be this counter so that the final element looks something like this: div id equal to 1. That way, during deletion, it is easy for me to find that div and delete it. So what does this line of code do? Div element dot set attribute id comma ctr will take this counter variable and set that id to that div. Let's see this in action. If I add a few to dos now, after this runs, taking a long time. Hi there. Hello. If you look at the first div over here, notice it has an ID now. The parent div has an ID equal to 1. The second div has a ID equal to 2. Where is this ID coming from on both of these divs? The ID is coming from this set attribute that I call. Okay, whenever I'm creating a new div element, I'm going to give it an ID of 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. Why am I doing that? So that whenever I call delete to do, whenever I call delete to do, here also now I have to do some more string concatenation plus ctr plus this thing. What did I do? I said I'm going to call delete to do with that specific counter variable. This might boggle a few heads. Yeah, what is happening here, Harkirat? But if you look at it, let me copy this whole very complicated concatenated string. What is the string? It says div plus value plus slash div. Create the first, div element with this dynamic value. Then it starts a button on click equal to call delete to do with this complicated, dynamic counter variable, and then end the function call. You start the function call, you put the complicated variable in there, you end the function call, and then everything else after that is the same. If I copy this whole thing and open the console and let's say set value equal to go to gym, let ctr equal to 1, then if I type this, it is the same as having a div which has body as go to gym and having a button that calls delete to do with 1. That is the new thing that I added. Okay, whenever we are calling delete to do, 1 goes inside the specific counter variable, gets called with it. Again, the easiest way to look at this is copy this whole thing and then, create a counter variable, create a value variable, and look at the final div that comes over here. Okay? I will recap everything. Don't worry. This feels a little complicated. Lastly, the delete to do function will take an index variable as an input. And what is this supposed to do? Const element equal to document dot, get element by ID index, and then element dot parent node dot remove child element. Element dot parent node, which means, whatever is the to do over here, iska parent node, which is body, dot remove child, this specific node. That is what we're doing here. Now, if you look at it, if I run it, I'm able to add to dos. I'm able to delete to dos as well. It's not working correctly right now, as you can see. Something is wrong. We'll debug very soon. But for everyone, some small advice for everyone who is able to understand as Harkirat codes, but is not able to code themselves, um, after the class, delete the whole thing and try to code everything yourself. Try to remember the things that we have learned. Feel free to look at the slides, but you should code yourself. Else, looking at someone else's code is the worst way to learn coding. All right. There is a bug here as well, which is another great thing for you to figure out. I'll be here for whatever the next 30 minutes. Can you try to debug this? This is wrong right now. If I try to delete this specific div, the one below it gets deleted. Why is that? No idea. Uh, 1, 2, 3 looks right. Yeah, I have no idea. We'll see. We'll debug it. Let me take this code, post this in the slides at the very end of this more complex elements. Try to debug this, and I will also debug in like 5 minutes. But that's the better way to learn. Code to debug. I'm sure some of you already see it, but there is some bug over here. Try to understand what that bug is and try to fix it. The starter code has been pasted in this more complex elements. If you go to the end, this is the starter code. It has a bug. Oh, sorry. Fresh. I don't see it. Oh, sorry. Wrong slide I put it in. There you go. It's in the more complex elements section here. At the end, code to debug. Can you try to debug this? Let me paste this in chat as well. Looking at the code, I can't see anything wrong. I will debug this by putting a bunch of logs. But maybe some of you do. And try to figure out what that is. Let's do a poll also. Akash, how was this? Were you able to understand one way to create to-do applications? There is another way. We'll discuss that tomorrow. But 85%, totally fine. I'm here. We'll answer questions. What doubts do you guys have? 15% just focus on the doubt. 85% try to fix this. As you can see, the wrong thing is being deleted. If I delete the high to do, something below it gets deleted. Figure out why that is. I have no idea. And for everyone else, I'm looking at Q&A. Let's see what questions you guys have. Index started as 0. Why should that fix it? Why do you have index as an parameter in get element by ID? Because what is the ID that I have given to every div? What is if I inspect element, what is the ID over here? Div ID equal to 3, div ID equal to 1. I gave it a numerical ID. I shouldn't have done that. A good ID would be, something like this. To do /1. To do -2. That is a better ID to give. But since I gave the ID as a number, over here also I have to do, get element by ID number. Now, if I did to do, then I could have done something like this. Okay, the ID that I'm giving is to do -1. And when I'm deleting, I'm finding it here as to do -1. Get element by ID, to do -1, to do -2. If I run this, let's see if that fixes it. I don't think it will. Yeah, that doesn't fix it. But now if you look at it, every div has element ID, to do -1, to do -2, to do -4, like that. So, that is why I had given index as an ID over here. Need to add prefix ID equal to this thing. Next line after the first line, delete to do function. Parent not remove child element. Did not understand that. Jan when. How to run indexed HTML output in Replit? Can you show it once? What do you mean output? Do you mean JavaScript output? Do you mean HTML output? The way to run HTML in Replit is you go to repl.it, this website, you click on create REPL, you select HTML, CSS, and JavaScript over here. Click on create REPL. It'll give you a page like this. Inside this page, write your code over here. For example, I write hello world 2, and I can see it run over here. That's how you run HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in Replit. Thought that's straightforward. Has no one been able to figure this out? I'm surprised actually. You are incrementing before new div.h in your HTML. Ah, that's it. Oh, yeah, there you go. This I am doing in the wrong place. I am doing a CTR equal to CTR plus 1. And यहाँ पे I'm adding the CTR. I'm sure most of you figured this out. It should happen afterwards. Here, CTR equal to CTR plus 1. Great. Totally did not leave it intentionally. Actually, did not leave it intentionally, if I'm being honest. Now let's run it one more time. Hi. Hello. Hi there. If I click on the first delete, hi gets deleted. If I click on the last one, this gets deleted. We're good. All right. What was the issue? I was giving it the ID of CTR, then incrementing CTR, and then deleting, the incremented CTR. So I was deleting the next one. That was the issue. After everything is done, I should increase the value of counter. Great catch. Class is done. That's all I had. I'm just here for the 15%. If any doubt, I can help answer or recap. One thing if you can do before tomorrow's class is try going through the second approach, because this is where everything will go above your head, like most people, what beginners. So try to understand this solution number two. That will take away this ugliness that we have written, but that will complicate things a different way. So try to go through that code before tomorrow. Everyone else, classes commenced, and I'm just looking at chat now. If anyone has any questions, please post them in chat. All right. Code walkthrough, please. All right. Let's walk through the code from the top. HTML is simple, nothing too complicated. An input box and a button. If you run it, you see an input box, you see a button. Everything else is JavaScript. We will get to what JavaScript is, but I'm assuming HTML code is straightforward. The only thing is, whenever you click on the button, we call a add to do function. Let's paste the JavaScript now. What does the add to do function do? The add to do function gets the input element, which means gets this HTML element in this variable, gets the value inside this HTML value, HTML element in this variable. So if I have written hi there over here, hi there is what gets stored in this value variable. Then we create a fresh div element. It isn't yet put on the DOM, just created a fresh div element. We set its ID to be to do dash a counter variable. To do dash counter is initialized to 1. So the very first time this is called, the ID will be set to do dash 1 over here. The ID would be to do dash 1. Then I say कि जो नया div element है ना, the new div element dot inner HTML, this is probably the most complicated line to look at, because we are concatenating a few strings together. Why are we doing that? Because we want to create a very dynamic HTML string over here, which has a div element whose value is this hi there. So this hi there should be the value inside the div element. Has a button. When you click on which button, on click equal to, it calls the delete to do function with this counter variable. I repeat, here I set the ID to be to do dash 1. Here we are making sure that whenever the button is clicked, this one variable for that specific to do reaches the delete to do function, so that inside the delete to do function, we can get that specific div and remove it. That is why here we added the counter variable as an argument. ताकि delete to do जब call हो, whenever delete to do gets called, it gets called with that specific counter. And then finally we append it to the body. We get the parent element, this body parent element. We append the div element over there. Then we increase the counter. If I run this, what happens? When I add the very first to do, a new div gets appended whose ID is to do dash 1. A new div gets appended whose ID is this, and inner HTML is a div which has that content, and a button that has delete. When you click on it, it calls delete to do with 1. If I do it again, ID is to do dash 2. It calls delete to do with 2. If I do it again, ID is to do dash 3. It calls delete to do with 3. So on and so forth. Okay. And now thankfully, since delete to do is getting called with the right arguments, it just works as expected. Hopefully that's clear. All right. What happens when you try to delete the document itself? I don't know. I don't think you can delete the document. I think the document doesn't have any parent. Let's try it out. Document dot parent. Document doesn't have a parent, so you can't really delete the document. You can delete the body if you want, which will empty the whole thing. Document dot get element by ID. Oh, sorry, query selector body. Cannot call child, remove child on the node. Node to be removed is not the child of this node. Huh. Whatever. Document dot children of 0. Document dot remove child, document dot children of 0. If I run this, the whole thing becomes empty. We have an empty DOM then. Um, a bit confused as to where to use the dot, where to use the hashtag, and where to use nothing. Great question. If I have body, if I have a div element that I want to select, then you don't use anything. You use nothing. When you do a document.query selector, okay, someone suggested this easier console. I'll just type things here. I probably cannot see it. Let me just do it here only. If I do a document.query selector of div, it gives me this div element right here. If I hover over this, let's do a span. There are like other divs that get added, so you don't see anything there. Let's do this. Oh. Let's do this again. There you go. There you go. If I do a document.query selector span, it gives me this span element right here. If I do a dot span, what will happen? Nothing happens. If I do a hashtag span, what happens? Nothing happens. What does that tell you? If you want to get an element, then you have to give the actual name of the element. Span, div, body, like that. But if this span had an ID equal to, greeting, since this is a greeting over here, then you do a document.query selector dot greeting. Sorry, hashtag greeting. Need to run this. Need to redo an element. If you want to get the element whose ID is greeting, you use a hashtag. If you want to style an element, whose ID is greeting, then you use hashtag. It becomes red in color. Similarly, if something has a class of greeting, and if you want to style it, then you use dot. So that's the difference between dot, hashtag, and the raw element. Why did it not style? Dot greeting, background color, class. There you go. All right. Another Notion doc. What are we learning next week? Just look at the syllabus. So until now, we should hopefully be able to complete everything minus this. We might be able to complete this as well. This is also not very needed. So next week onwards, we'll go into Node.js. Yeah. Abhi tak we have covered this. And this week we're trying to cover this. Next week we'll try to cover this. All right. What if we want to add our to-dos above the input? That's a great question. What do you think you should do? This was our code. I want to add it above. I'll create a div above it. Div ID equal to to-do container. And then where will I append these divs? I will append it over here. Where will I delete divs from? Not the body. No, that's fine. I will just append it to this to-do container. Where have I added the to-do container? Above the inputs. So now if I run this, hi, they come above. How did I do it? I did not append it to the body. I did not put it at the end of the body. I said put them here. So it will start to put all the to-dos here. So they will appear above the input and the button. Notion doc. Okay. In the callback and provisioning, something like this. Now, here to resolve parameter in line 2, like function console log highest callback, this I understand well. But here the problem is in async await code below, I am unable to debug what's in resolve parameter. Then function, what's in resolve parameter in line 2? So you're saying what is in this resolve parameter, Kirat? It says that's an anonymous function, but what's inside it? I am really confused, man. Please check. All right. Your question is okay, and for everyone else, don't worry about this. This is a more complex question inside promises. So first you need to understand promises, then you should understand this. Let's see. Your question is, okay, given this implementation, what is the resolve function? You logged resolve over here. You saw it as an anonymous function. It says function anonymous. You don't know what resolve is. Do you remember when we created the promise class last week? I tried to create a promise class myself. Do you remember that? How was it created? We have a whoever has created this promise class, the class only, someone has written some JavaScript code. Let's try to write this ourselves. Create a class called promise2, which has a constructor which takes what as an argument. When you do a new promise, what do you pass it inside? You pass it in a very big function. है ना? That is how you do promises. Whenever you define a new promise, you give it a very big function. So what does a promise class take as input? It takes a function as an input. This dot fn equal to fn. है I just set this function, in this class so I can use it later on. When you do this, what does the promise do? It actually calls the function, right? ये function call होता है, set timeout call होता है, then you eventually resolve it. So what is the other thing I have to do? I have to call this function as well. That's all the constructor has to do. If you define a new promise, it will take this function as an input. It will call that function as well. This function gets called. Once this function gets called, this function, here comes the complicated bit. When this function gets called, you pass it in a resolve, which means this resolve that you're calling here is actually passed in by the promise class. Hence, it is an anonymous function. नहीं समझ आया ना? कोई बात नहीं, अभी समझ आएगा. रुक जा थोड़ी देर. When this gets called is when you need to resolve, which means whenever someone calls then on you, I repeat, I mean, this is very complicated. Bear with me for 2 seconds. I'm just creating an implementation of the promise class and I'm showing why it gets resolved why this gets logged as an anonymous function. And then I'll, let me write this the whole thing down, then I'll explain what the class is. Okay? Then में होगा, if not, fn and or you call dot resolve for each fn. All right. This is an implementation of the promise class. This should most probably work. Let's try it out. Let's replace your promise with my promise2 class. Okay? Let's not use the global promise class. I have created another function called promise2 or another class called promise2. Let's try that out. This is very complicated. Everyone else don't worry about this. And this might also be wrong, as you can see. Cannot class access promise before initiations. Let me put this to the top. Let's run this one more time. Can you see function anonymous again? Can you see function anonymous logged again? Can you see hi gets printed after 1 second? Then after some time, hello gets printed. Then after some time, your third thing gets printed. So is this promise class the same as the promise class that JavaScript has? Yes, sir, Kirat. Looks the same at least. Print bhi function anonymous ho raha hai. Just like, if I replace promise to back with promise, the same thing comes over here. So in their implementation and in our implementation, everything is the same. So ideally, so looking at this, you should be able to understand what anonymous is, but I'm sure you don't understand what I've written over here. I wrote a bunch of things together. But under the hood, the promise class is also, this only, which is why you see anonymous function here and here. Question is, what is this anonymous function? This is what gets called over here, right? Oh, nahi samajh aaya na, bahut zyada. Very, very recursive class this is. But let me try to explain. You were worried about, Harkirat, what is resolve? You said I am logging resolve. Resolve is logging as an anonymous function. What is resolve? New promise. Whenever you create a promise class variable, it takes a function as an input. It takes a function as an input. You call that function with an anonymous function. This gets called with resolve set. The problem with promises is, okay, you define a variable here and you give a function that gets called over here with another function which is stored in this resolve value, which is why it is so complicated. The reason the promise class is, okay, to begin with, all beginners don't worry at all. You don't ever write the promise class yourself. So, this is all extra fluff on top. Don't worry about this, maybe forever. I also, in the last class only wrote this myself. You don't need to worry about how this works. If you want to understand the depths of it, the reason promises are complicated is because you define them like this, where you give it a function which gets called over here with a function that the user has to call in this body. That is why promises are complicated, because you pass around functions too much. Specifically to answer your question, what exactly is resolve, Kirat? When you call this .fn, when you call whatever function that the end user has given you, which in this case is your function, you call it with another function. And since this doesn't have a name, it's an anonymous function. That is why anonymous gets printed over here. Happy to dive deeper, but I understand this because I wrote this. Until you write this yourself, you will not be able to understand this. And this is the best I can explain it. I can explain it 10 times more. Happy to at the end of the class. But this is the crux of your answer. This is how the promise class is written. It isn't too complicated, but it is. It isn't too complicated to look at. But unfortunately, the constructor is taking a function that you are calling with another function that the user calls whenever they are done with their asynchronous operation, which is why it's a little complicated to digest. So, look at this code. I'm keeping it open here and, happy to dive deep. If there's specific doubt in this, I'm happy to answer it more. You had more questions. Sorry. I'm coming to your DigitalOcean thing. Let me just do that first. He started after this beginning of the class. Question is, Bhaiya, I'm facing up issues while deploying my code to DigitalOcean Droplet as my application is running on port 5173, which is the React application, and I'm not able to access it via IP:port number over the internet. Why? Do you have firewall rules set in DigitalOcean? Let me show you that really quickly. As firstly, I was able to do the same on Azure. I simply think put inbound rules in networking section for that specific port was accessible on the internet, but in digital, no, this feature should be there. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what a firewall is. Create a firewall. I can do that via running Nginx, but I'm not able to map one of the ports of the IP. So first of all, this is it. Why are you not able to create a firewall? Click on create firewall, select your ports and open them up. I think DigitalOcean provides that. If not, let me know. And this is how I access via terminal, and password is this. So now everyone knows this. You should change this password. I'm using the same. So basically, why have you created a firewall? Click on create firewall. Let me just show you. I don't have DigitalOcean logged in. Please increase the pace of class a bit. I would love to, but as I said, this code is going to be slightly slow paced. That said, I'm happy to take advanced classes and boggle your head if you're looking for some challenges. All right, you went to firewalls, networking, and firewalls. Create a new firewall. Give it a random name. Add a new rule. not all TCP. Maybe select all TCP for now. Ideally, you should select a small port range, but select all TCP over here. Select all IPv4, all IPv6 over here. Click on create firewall. Okay, click on this button. It will create a firewall. Then go to your droplet. Go to your droplet and attach that firewall there. You'll be good to go. ठीक है? क्या किया मैंने? I went to networking. I went to firewalls. I created a new firewall. I selected all TCP over here. I clicked on create firewall. Make sure you give it a name. And then based on this name, go to your droplet and select your droplet, go to the firewall section, attach that firewall here. You're good to go. That's the first question. What is your second question, sir? You should change your password. Everyone saw it. But yeah, one more thing. That's how you hack a website. Now that he has this, he has given this. I wish I could share the things that I've done and the creators that I've hacked. But this is what happens. Now I'm in his, whatever, this thing, machine. Now he can change the password. But what I'll do is I'll take my SSH keys and I'll put it in authorized keys. What this will do is now, even if he changes the password, I can still access his machine. Change your password, sir. Then I'll show everyone how I can still access this machine. So as you can see, now I don't have to give it a password anymore. It doesn't ask me for the password. It asks me for something else. It asks me for a passphrase, which is my own SSH key passphrase. Now, even if he changes the password, I can access his droplet forever. So let me change that. But you get the idea. If you ever get access to someone else's machine once, add your SSH keys to their authorized keys, and then you can access it forever. And you can do the same in your friend's machine. Let's say if your friend's machine is open right next to you in your college campus, go to their laptop quickly, open the terminal, add your authorized keys there. What are authorized keys? We'll discuss eventually when we reach GitHub. Okay, what exactly this key on the right is. But basically, it's again a public private key only, like we discussed in crypto. And the private key I have locally. If I share my private key, I'm screwed. Right now, this is what I logged, right? This I can share with anyone. But if I logged this by mistake, ID underscore RSA, not ID underscore RSA.pub, then you all would have been able to log into my GitHub, whatever. Almost. Not exactly. I also have a password attached to my passphrase. So even if someone has access to my machine and they're able to, print out this RSA, they won't be able to use it unless they have access to my passphrase, which, well, I have leaked in a few YouTube videos. So it's actually fairly accessible, particularly getting back on track. One more thing, while I was setting up daily code monorepo locally, it is failing. But yeah, I migrated database. Okay, let's see. You have not generated the Prisma client? Did you run? Oh, you have run this. Every time I run this, it shows me the error. What is the error? Don't seed first. First generate the client. Pehle run this. After you've run this, then run seed. If it still happens, let me know. But this is something I don't strictly want to help on because, set this up yourself. These are the challenges that you should fix. If you're setting up an open source project, no hand holding there. All right. Cool class is really interesting sitting. All righty. Uh, Let me know if this you understood, Viper sir. Your name is Viper. But yeah, writing on promise class is very hard. People don't ask these questions. I'm glad that you're asking them. Okay, what exactly resolve is here. And as I said, it is this thing. But I'm sure this thing is not very easy to digest the first time you're looking at it. I want to know from where Mern Stack project will start. Like I know Mern Stack, when you skip these classes, Mern Stack will start after React at the very least. If the project is what you're looking for, wait for React, recoil, state management, all of this, and then maybe, come back to the classes. Until then, skip. Shuru mein, I know I have to hold back my yawns from time to time. I know we're going fairly slow, but this is my last live cohort, I think. So, I just want to make sure every basic thing is covered before we move on to slightly advanced things, which will also happen. And we are doing on-site Bangalore Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The 3 classes are going to be Rust, NeoVim, and how to contribute to an open source project. So that might be more relevant for you. Fill out the form. We'll be throwing out the forms for cohort 3 people very soon. So, come there. You'll have more fun than, right now. What happens when you try to delete the document? I answered that. Okay, let me open chat for one more round and then we'll call it. How can I ensure my CSS renders consistently across all browsers? I made the VS Code landing page on Mac OS using Google Chrome web browser. However, when I open it in Safari, yeah, Google something called viewport, which is a single line of code that you can put that should fix your problem right here. And not just browsers. It's more of around how devices render websites. Something called PPI, I think, pixel something. What is PPI? Hota na, I think. Basically, every machine renders pixels a certain way. So there's something called the viewport you can use to make it consistent across all devices. I think that's the way to do it. To specifically, I think to the answer to your question here. Is there any application that manages different wallets in a single place? Oh, like Web2 wallets? There are. I mean, Google Pay is one such answer, right? It shows you all your balances. There's a company called the Devfolio folks have a company. What's it called? Forgot the name. Fold is a I think they do something. I haven't tried it, but I think they do this. But again, this is Web2. Canada HFC will be likewise. Is there any platform that manages wallets like so I think you fundamentally don't understand wallets then. There is no need of a platform that manages all three of these together. Backpack में whatever wallets, whatever private keys you have, you can import them to Phantom. Phantom में whatever private keys you have, you can import them to MetaMask. There is no need of an aggregator. Each one of these individually is an aggregator. It's like asking, can you merge Google Pay and Paytm? Paytm also connects to all of your banks. Google Pay also connects to all of your banks. So you can't really merge Paytm and Google Pay. Both of them are layers on top of your private keys, layers on top of your banks. There's no point merging them. Phantom, whatever I have in Phantom, if I have 10 banks over here, let's say HDFC Access, I can have the same banks here in Backpack. Uh, so, there is no need of a wallet aggregator. Each wallet in itself is an aggregator. Oh, you've created a Explorer. Let's see. There's this wallet I have that I used to send some money. Let's see. That looks pretty good. Transaction history it shows, all the signatures it shows. Chalo, what happens if I click on it? It just shows you the other one. That's fine. Yeah, great start. It shows you all your data, uh, how much SOL you have, and then shows you all the signatures of your recent transactions. It's a great start, sir. The reason I say it's a great start is because the most complicated thing is what you have to do next, which is transaction parsing, which means what was this transaction about? Understanding that is very hard. Every transaction is very nuanced and complicated. Some of these are spam transactions. Figuring out what is this transaction, that is the most hardest bit in a block explorer. All right. If we delete the parent element, if we delete parent, then if the child is used by some function, then the parent would also delete as it like OS with zombie process. It would happen like delete the whole thing. पहली बात तो भाई इंग्लिश की दाद देनी पड़ेगी. Little complicated your words are, but I think I get what you're saying. What you're saying is there a zombie variable if I ever delete a parent, but its child is used somewhere else? Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's create a div tag inside which there is another div tag. And let's give this class equal to parent. Oh, sorry, ID equal to parent. Div ID equal to child. Just because something is deleted from the DOM doesn't mean it cannot still exist in memory. I repeat, if you saw over here, document.create element div. If I create this div element, does it exist in the DOM? No. But is this a zombie variable? No. It still exists in the JavaScript memory. It's just not put in the DOM yet. Similarly, if I do a document, let me run this either. Dot get element by ID parent. Sorry, const variable equal to the child. If I type v, what the hell? Acha, sorry. Inspect const v equal to document dot get element by id child. Now I have a variable which has this thing. Then let me delete the parent now. Document dot get element by id parent dot parent node dot remove child. This thing. Let me remove the parent. As you can see, parent is gone. If I look at the variable, it still exists. Doesn't mean this is a zombie in memory. This is just not present in the DOM. It is still a variable that is present properly in memory, and I can reinsert it in the DOM if needed. But right now, it just exists outside the DOM. All right, more Notion docs, wallet, more Notion doc. I don't know what that is. Calendar. Why is it so left aligned? What am I missing? Where is the calendar? Syllabus. Sorry, calendar is the last one. Let's see. Today. Oh, nice. Pretty good. Oh, nice. It points you to the exact thingy. Uh, Someone PR'd this. I think Sargam is reviewing it. This also looks okay only. Yeah, I'm just trying to think which one to you. The other one was a little more, the UX is complete. This is also great. I'm not saying this is not good. I'm just saying, the other one has, some extra things which I think might get merged, but irrespective, feel free to PR it. I don't know if this will get merged, but it looks good. Thank you. Appreciate it. हरकियत भैया आप हमेशा बोलते हो कि जस्ट लेट मी नो, लेकिन कैसे? बिकॉज ट्विटर आपका डीएम नहीं कर सकते. How to reach you? So there are a few ways. Discord tagging is one, but generally, if it is important, let Rookie Aryan know. Rookie and KPS, the three mods we have, right? Let any one of them know if it's actually really urgent. They will make sure it comes to me. And what depends on the question, right? A few questions. It's a good idea if they don't reach me. Other questions. 100x Devs official Twitter, that is open. I don't handle that, but people over there will also make sure it reaches me if it's important. All right. What happens when you try to delete the document? I answered that. Deletes the whole thing, right? You see a white page after that. On topic. Can you ask me how to build it? My idea is make something to manage subsidy funds on India versus blockchain. What are subsidy funds? I have no idea. On this topic, suggest a different one. Oh, this is sorry. I'm sleeping on time and waking on time these days. This is Smart India Hackathon. To store digital information, power cryptocurrencies can radically change multiple sectors. Provide ideas. What is your idea? Can you ask me how to build it? My idea is make something to manage subsidy funds in India via blockchain. I don't know what subsidy funds are. So can you explain that to me? I got an airdrop on the Ton chain called Dogs. I heard a lot about this. It will be live on a sex on 19th August. I need Ton to move this. Where can I buy? You can buy it on Binance now. Binance is legal to do a small P2P and convert the USDT into Ton, send it to your wallet and go from there. All right. Let's see. How much is it worth? 4573 dollars. There might be a pre-market for it. Uh, this isn't it. What chain did you say? Ton. Is this it? I don't know if this is it. Oh, Ton is the Telegram this thing, right? How did you get it? Maybe other people got it as well. Is it like just on the basis of using Telegram or is it something else? 1 second. Hello. 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 Hi, Sahab. Uh, yeah. How did you get the airdrop? Let me open chat. Maybe some other people might hear might also make some money. How did you get the airdrop? अरे भाई उससे पूछा है, पता नहीं तो. Okay, edit the doc again, please check it. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not moving forward. But like Google how to get this airdrop. A few people answered it. A few people I got this on saw this on Twitter as well. So I think I don't know. You might have some allocation, maybe not. Um, in the second code, I was able to debug it. What I was saying was that with the comparison to the first code, what's in the second code's resolve function in line two? In comparison to the first function, like there is nothing written after the await on the second code. Oh, I get what you're saying. You are saying कि यार फंक्शन कहाँ है यहाँ पे तो you're saying here तो I get there is some function that is passed here that is probably what resolve is, but here there is no dot then. When you're using async await, Harkirat, where is the dot then? What is the dot then even? And the answer is async await is just syntactic sugar for promises. So if you have written this, it is the same as writing this. You might think it is different, but it isn't. They're both the same. And async await syntax, whenever you are using, assume that under the hood it gets converted into something like this only. So you might feel like you are writing cleaners. I mean, you are writing cleaner syntax, more easier to read syntax, but under the hood that gets converted into this only. So whatever converts it into this creates such a function, which is what resolve is. So whenever you're writing this, does not mean it just gets converted into something like this dot then function, and then this is what happens when you use async await. You look at code like this, but under the hood, async await is just syntactic sugar on top of promises. What does syntactic sugar mean? It means it's the same. It gets converted to promises only. Under the hood, it uses promises only. So that promise will have that specific resolve function that is an anonymous function. Inside delete function, is it necessary to take the element by ID and not query selector? No, you can use query selector. You can use query selector, doesn't matter. Or you can use, you can use either one of these, doesn't matter. How to send you doubts like this one, like the ones you solved? What does that mean? Doubts, I look at Q&A and, like I'm answering here in chat. Of course, I might miss some, but this is where I look at them usually. Context for tomorrow, we will do some more DOM manipulation. We will create some foundations for React, which will boggle a few heads. That's it. You'll understand a little bit about state management, a bunch of things that are eventually going to come in React. I want to create a foundation for, so that for the next 3-4 weeks, you can, start to read about them. And yeah, go from there. All right. This looks great. Slightly cleaner of assignment, and, post it on GitHub. Beautiful. Love it. How do I ensure CSS renders consistently across all browsers? We answered that one. All right, let's look at a few Notion docs and we'll call it done with this one, 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 done with this one. Actually, really confused. I have studied DSA before joining the cohort. Should I continue with DSA? This really is your personal choice, sir. I think both are necessary. I think you should both focus on the both of them. I think you can manage both of them together. It's a very simple project right now, based on some basic knowledge. That's fine. And it's not working right now. I don't know why. Let's see. Probably a course error. I don't know why how it was working for you. Or not a course error. The backend is down. Enter the uniform. Acha, okay, that's you need the whole URL over there. Let's see. Fetch data. There you go. Shows you the data, clear data, fetch data. I mean, this is a decent project to understand async await was. It's not too bad and good work and focus on both. Answered that, answered that, answered that, answered that. All right, we call it here, guys. Thank you for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow, where we discuss a little more DOM manipulation, do some reconciliation using DOM manipulation only. Have some intuition for state management. Then we'll not touch front end for a long time. We'll come back to front end when we reach React. All right. We'll call it here. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night, boys and girls. Bye bye.